What I'd like to talk about today is putting your sketch on your MATLAB webpage. I've actually put together a little 5-minute or so instructional video, but I want to go through it in class here once just in case there's some questions that I haven't anticipated. Let's go down here. So yeah, if you follow this link right here, it'll launch me going through and putting a processing sketch on the web. So I'll do that, and then there was something about stale bubbles last time that I didn't get to talk about, and I'd like to talk about today. And then I want to actually get into a little bit more sophistication about, well, when a bubble goes stale, let's not just have it disappear. Let's do something with it. Maybe have it, I don't know, we'll figure out what we should do with it. And then I want to finish, if I have time, I'm going to point you to a book by Daniel Schiffman, which if you have curiosity about continuing your exploration of processing, that's a fantastic place to go. All right, any questions before I get going? Well, first things first, then let's talk about putting your processing sketch on the web. So I'm going to go over to the MATLAB. You can do this on any computer. I'm logging into Math, but you can do it on any of the MATLAB computers. That was a terrible mistyping of my password. That's better. And let me just get rid of my public HTML directory so that I have nothing there. All right. So every MATLAB user has a place where they can put web pages that will then be accessible to the outside world. And one of the things I really like about processing is it's fantastically easy to get your processing sketch onto a web page. So I guess the first thing we should do is you're in your MATLAB home directory. All of your web pages need to go in a folder called public HTML. And you don't really need to take notes for this because it's in the video, so I'm just kind of going through the process. So you can create this folder, public HTML, and it has to be exactly that. It has to match case. It has to have this little underscore here. It's hard-coded into the web server on Math that's where it's going to be. So I create that directory. And then I'm just going to grab one of our sketches. Let me see. I'll just grab the most recent version of the bubble sketch. Here, can't remember if we were working on this one or this one. Let's just see what this one looks like. I don't even remember where we left off with the bubble sketch. Looks like we left off with bouncing and with inelastic bouncing. So that's in the April 22nd, 2013 bubbles directory. So let's quit that. What I'm going to do is transfer that file over to the web page folder that I just created. And I'm going to use something called FileZilla, I think is what I'm going to use. So let's go there. Come on. And this is an open source piece of software that I've mentioned before about getting files back and forth between your computer, which is where your processing programs are going to be now, and the MATLAB. So math.whitman.edu is the host name. The username is your user ID. The password is your MATLAB password. And then the port number has to be 22. Make sure you remember that. If you don't put 22 in there, it'll fail to connect. You'll see some error message, not error messages, some sort of progress messages up here in this window. And if you're successful, you'll see your MATLAB files appear in the right-hand window. And there's the little public HTML folder that I just created. If I go inside there, you'll see that it's empty. What I'd like to do is grab this folder, the April 22nd version of Bubbles, and just drag it in. It doesn't have to be, no. So I drag it, I drop it, given enough time, it'll appear. Looks like the file transfer failed for some reason. No, I don't know why it said that, but did you see that little error message right there? Anyway. Oh, the swap file from Vim. I don't care about that. So I've now successfully dragged the processing folder over with its processing program inside. If I go back to my terminal and go into the public HTML directory, now the sketch file is there. Let's go into that sketch folder, and there's the corresponding source file. I've created a little template for you, a little HTML file that is 99% of the way there for loading your sketch onto the web. And the easiest way to get that is with this wget command that we've talked about before. So, wget, the full URL of this file that you're getting is given here, and then we hit enter, and it will very quickly download this tiny file. And if I do ls, I now see an additional file in there called index.html. There's one last step to getting this done, and that is to edit the index.html file. And you can use Vim and replace this example with your particular, what was it, April 22nd, 2013 bubbles, I think is what it was. So replace the default file name .pde with your sketch's file name. And quit. And we're almost there. Go to your favorite browser and type in the following URL, math.whitman.edu /shula/apr_22_2013 and that should do it. And now the browser is running your sketch.
If you just go to Shular, does it have an index?
So you're getting into the vagaries of HTML, and frankly, I'm not sure what will happen if I do this. Yeah, so I get to see a folder there, and if I click on that folder again, I'm not sure. Okay, it'll launch that thing. Yeah. But you can, if you have other web pages and you have an index.html in this folder, then it's going to change that behavior. So I'm not going to rely on that. That said, you can name this folder anything you like. So let's go back over and change it to bubbles. So when you do the HTML version of your sketch, it's not as fussy as the regular processing development environment. So now what I've done is I've changed the top level folder to bubbles, and the contents are exactly the same. And that changes the URL. So now I can just type bubbles up here and get the same result. And in fact, that's a lie. That's a cached version. Okay. And then if you know a little bit of HTML, you can actually do a little bit more. So you can go into the index.html, and if you don't know any HTML, don't worry about it. You can just do this. But maybe it looks a little bit better if we center it. And we could even put a little title up there, say and now if I reload it, my sketch will be centered and will have the title Tiny Bubbles. Let's see here, math, bubbles, enter. You can do a lot more, and again, this is really not something that we'll do in our class, but let me show you a project that a student and I worked on over the summer. Which is also in processing. Yeah, he talked about it in the undergraduate conference. So now I can actually get the sketch to interact with the surrounding HTML. And you can develop some fairly sophisticated applications just by mixing processing with HTML. Some really beautiful stuff. And I can move this around a little bit and then restart the algorithm. So this is not part of the processing sketch. The processing sketch is everything in this square box, in this rectangle here. All of this stuff is an external web page that's actually talking to the sketch. So when I click Restart Algorithm, it sends a message to the sketch that it should restart. So I'm giving you a very brief introduction to a fairly powerful tool, and one of the other nice things about this is this will run not only in a browser but on a phone, iPad, iPhone, Android, whatever. It's platform independent. Yeah?
If you know some HTML, could you use it as an input beyond?
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. So you can do a lot with processing, I think, is just the moral of that story. I'm asking you in the most recent homework to follow these instructions. Oh, coming soon. I better put that link there. Follow these instructions and put the full URL of your sketch. By URL, I mean http://math.whitman.edu / your user ID and then the folder name. So that when I click on that link or when I copy that link into my browser, it will launch your sketch. And I want you to test it before you send it to me to make sure that it works. Don't just guess. Actually try it. Make sure that it works. And then also submit to me the .pde file for the sketch. So this will actually save me some time because I can just launch the URL in my browser and then I can look at your code and I can just sort of bounce back and forth and give you meaningful feedback. Any questions about that? Okay.
If we want to put our previous sketches on our website.
Absolutely, you can do that. Yep. And if you send me a URL, I can actually put together a page of links for people to look at. Okay, what I wanted to do was talk about stale bubbles. So, yeah, let's get out of here. Let's get out of here. Let's go here and here. So I'm going to change this to, what's today, the 26th? I don't really remember exactly where we were on this sketch, but we'll just start there. Remember, when we're using traditional processing, the name of the file has to match the name of the folder. So this is going to be the April 26th version of the Bubbles sketch. This is the same thing that I just put on the web, so I have a pretty good idea of what this looks like. But let me run it for you. So this is bouncing off the ceiling, and we talked about how to make that happen last time, and we generalized it to all four boundaries. And this is, one of the problems with this is these bubbles aren't going away. I'm getting more and more and more bubbles. Why? They're not going off the top, and that's the only logic that I have for getting rid of bubbles. So this is just going to grind to a halt over a period of time. If you go down and you look at my removal stuff, we need another way of removing bubbles. Right? Removing bubbles is no longer just easy by going off the top. Can you think of another way of identifying stale bubbles? In particular, the y velocity. If the y velocity goes to 0, then it's a stale bubble. Sound like a plan? So we can modify this guy, and we can just put in something like, do you remember what the name of the y velocity was? What the variable was? Yeah, I think it was Vy. And I guess we'll just put equals 0 here. That ought to work. What's a way to verify? I mean, one way to verify this is we should see bubbles as they settle at the top. They should start disappearing, right? Because they're being removed from the list and therefore no longer being drawn. Let's do that. I can't tell. Doesn't look like they're going away. Got another idea? Well, let's see what. Maybe that's too strong. Vy equals 0. You could have it when it gets below a certain threshold. Oh, let me think about that for a second. Well, that's what I'm trying to think about. So Vy is a float. And, you know, we are hitting it with the elasticity, so it may take a really long time to get to 0. So maybe Sarah's idea of having a threshold would work. So we could do something like when, and we should think about the sign of this thing too. I don't even know if there is an absolute value function. Let's see if it actually likes the absolute value function. Well, it seems to have passed. No, they're still stuck there. That's interesting because this is not the way that I decided to do it, and it's not entirely clear to me why they're not going away. Let me show you the way that I came up with doing it, and then we'll see if we can figure out why this particular method isn't working. So I think in theory this should work, and so we're not noticing something. It's really strange. Can anybody think of anything before I bail? Yeah, let's make it 1. They might all go away, but yep, that's not good. Nope. It starts out with a small value. Starts out with 0 actually. So why were we getting bubbles in the first place? I want to make this work because it's more elegant than mine. Sure. Oh, maybe that's down here. There's the acceleration. And there's the initial velocity.
What if we didn't make it an absolute value?
Okay. Let's think about what happens when this starts. So when this starts, Vy starts out at 0. And by the time we check, let's go up here. By the time we check, so here's when the bubble gets created, right? And then you go through and you actually do a move. So the first move happens before the first stale bubble check. So let's go back down here. The fresh bubble has a 0 Vy, and then it gets a move. So Vy on the first time through becomes negative 0.01, right? And then it just gets worse from there until it hits, and then it goes up. So it goes positive. So it is going to be sort of bouncing back and forth, the velocities, the Vy. Let's print out.
When it bounced and then came down and then got 0, it would disappear here.
Well, when our guys bounce, they don't actually have velocity 0. What happens is the velocity flips.
No, but I mean, once the acceleration makes the velocity 0, it would just disappear in the air. That's the problem, even if we got this to work, or if it was bounced. Because I think right now the problem is bubbles always have a velocity of 0.0 negative or 0.01 if they're not moving. So you have to put the threshold.
So maybe my less elegant method is what I have to do. So what I was going to do is check if the current value of y is equal to the previous value of y. And if it is, then call that a dead bubble. So let's see if that actually works. So I'll go back to my original. I still think we can make that velocity thing work, but let's. So I'm going to introduce a new variable called yprev. And when I move, what I'm going to do is make yprev equal to y. Before I do anything else, I'll make yprev equal to y. And then I'm going to change y. And what we can do is check y minus yprev. Y minus yprev. And see if that gets us anywhere. I must have an error or something. Yprev cannot be resolved or is not a field. Doesn't like b.yprev. I gotta give it a value. Up here, excuse me. There we go. Okay, so when they sit there for a while, yprev becomes the same as y, and they go away. Now we're definitely getting a lot of bubbles here, more than we had before, but we should see if they're if the number of bubbles is actually leveling off. So let's print out the number of bubbles here. So let's do print line bubbles dot size. So the equilibrium, when we were just letting them go off the top and then go away, the equilibrium point was much lower than it is now. Presumably this will get to an equilibrium at some point, but maybe we're getting there. Yeah, I think we're nearly there now. So it looks like, 550 bubbles is about equilibrium. Maybe a little higher. There are a lot of things that are going to affect that equilibrium. Okay, so we now have a way of getting rid of old bubbles that are just stuck to the ceiling. Let me pause there and let Eli do his thing, and then we'll talk about making the disappearance of the bubbles maybe a little bit more interesting. So I'm going to disconnect here. You got your thing?
Yep.
Yeah. Should, if we're just patient, it should get it. Maybe not. Yeah. Oh, I can't see it. Stick that back in. Okay.
So my question was how to develop an app for an iPhone, iPad, iPod. So the kind of standard way to do it is using this developing environment called Xcode. It's free in the App Store, so you can download it. I downloaded it. And so I was just sort of playing around with it the last week, and it's actually very, it uses this Objective-C language, which is really similar to C++, which is what we used. And actually, if you don't want to learn Objective-C, you can actually use C++. So it's really user-friendly. There's all these like function templates that you can like just drag into your code. So here's like a C++ class definition. It throws it in there. Write the class name, instance variables, member functions. So it's pretty easy to use, which is pretty sweet. So the way writing an app kind of works is you're going to have a bunch of different screens, which are these zip files like this. And then for every zip file, you're going to write a class of each screen. So you have your .h file, .m file, which is the code, which is what we learned. So this provides, like this delegate is like, they kind of lay out how you should start your app. So like it has all the member functions of if it opens, if it doesn't open, all that stuff, which is pretty cool. And then the interface design is also really simple and easy. So they provide all these pre-coded objects. So if like you make all your own images. I made this little start field in processing, and you can just drag it over. But if you would like want a title, you can just bring a title. It's already there, and you can just play around with it and design it to your liking. So so it has all your kind of classic objects that you guys know, and then it has all the different like functions with your touch, so you don't have to write the code for that. You just put that in like your if-else statements so if I were to pinch, it'll recognize that, and then that will show up in your .h.m. And then some other things. It has like a testing suite, so like to test your app, it provides these project tests for you, and then basically to submit it and get it published, you just send the Apple Store your .app file, and they'll run it through tests, make sure you're not using code from some library that you didn't write and all that, and upload it. And it's free, and they make it really, really easy. So I would recommend checking this out. It's pretty cool.
It's free?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought it cost like $100 or something.
Xcode?
No, to upload an app onto the App Store.
Okay. I don't think so, man.
I don't know either.
Anyway, any questions?
I thought it was just like a minimal barrier just to keep people from. Anyway.
No, I didn't find that in my research, but maybe.
Yeah, that's cool. Any questions?
Yeah.
What was the app, or what was it called again that you downloaded from the App Store?
Xcode.
Xcode.
This
Okay.
little.
It's actually not from the App Store, is it?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, okay.
I got mine from the App Store.
Because there's a whole website, xcode.apple.com.
Oh, you can also download it.
Yeah, where all their developers live. Other questions? It's a very similar tool for Android, and I would say if you're familiar with both worlds, almost every app in the App Store, on the Apple App Store, has a parallel project in the Android store. And it's one of the sort of annoying things is, like the ESPN app for iPad or iPod. There's developers at ESPN that work on the iPad version and those that work on the Android version. They meet once a week and discuss, what the thing should look like, because it's like you have to keep two completely separate programs, one for each. But of course, you want the brand consistency across devices, and so they have to meet and talk about keeping things consistent. Any other questions? So this approach is somewhat similar to processing, right? We have these built-in functions, and they do certain things, and it's because what keeps iPhone apps looking consistent and similar is the fact that they're all built in a tool like this, in this tool. And so it has a certain look and feel. Like when Eli wanted to put a button on that thing, he dragged it over there and it looked like 1,000 buttons that you've seen on iPhones before, right? And that's because that's what everybody's using to build these apps. Okay, go ahead.
Can you write it like an app for yourself and not upload it to the Apple Store?
Yeah, for sure. They recommend you do that because then you load it on your iPhone, test it out, and then once you see that it's not.
Yeah. And they have like simulated iPhones, in this package here,
Gotcha.
which you kind of mentioned, didn't you? Like,
Yeah, they have. I didn't really go into testing very much, but I know they have they have a thorough testing stuff where you can run it through.
But some of the stuff, like if you're writing an app that uses the inertial sensor or something, you pretty much have to just put it on the phone and test it out. But for other stuff, if you're just pressing buttons and loading pages and things like that, you can. The simulator in here is pretty good. It acts just like an iPhone or something like that. So you don't actually need an iPhone to do it. Okay. Thanks. Go write an app. Get rich. I'll tell you what, you're a heck of a lot closer to being able to do it than the rest of the yahoos out there. Okay. So we've got these bubbles. One of the things that I don't like about this logic is I don't like reaching into the class or into the object to test. So what I'd like to do instead is make a member function that will ask, is this a stale bubble? So I'm going to go down to the bottom here and just write a function. And I often write my Boolean functions like that. Is stale? That's a question. Is stale? B is stale. True, then it's stale. False, then it's not stale. And what we'll do is we'll bury that little test that we had up here in the main draw function, this little test right here, and we'll put it down here. And we don't need the dot operator anymore because now this is a member function. It's actually called from within the calling object. So we'll do something like if y equals yprev, return true, else return false. So we hide that little test down in a member function. And then we can go up here and use it in a slightly more legible, slightly more encapsulated way if B is stale, then remove it. If B is stale. And this is something that you'll get used to as you write more and more code. You try to write code that reads like a sentence. And so that's why I called it isStale. If B is stale, remove it. And the way we designed it is that's going to be true if B is stale and false otherwise. Let's see. This should not have changed anything. Let's see if we can get this thing to run. And probably made a typographical error or something. Good point. Those pesky curly braces, thank you. So I think we're okay now. This is the end of the bubble class right here, and so it needs to be inside the bubble class because it's a member of the bubble class. And it appears to still be working. Okay. I want to make the disappearance of these things not super dramatic, but a little bit more dramatic. So what I'm going to do is create slightly larger bubbles. Let's make them of radius 3. So we should just have bigger bubbles now. Okay. So we have bigger bubbles. And what I'd like to do is before it gets stale, I'd like to have it change color or something like that. Have it give me some kind of indication that it's about to go away. Can you think of a way to make that happen?
If the difference between y and y pre is within a certain range, maybe.
Okay, let's add the caveat or add the condition that we're just going to keep this condition the way it is, and we're going to add new variables to get this to happen. So let's keep the y equals y prev condition and not futz around with it. It's too clean to futz around with. I like it too much. But instead of making it go stale right away, can we somehow delay it and give it time to change color? And remember, variables are cheap. I just threw y prev in there when I needed it. Got an idea, Carter?
Pretty bad though. I was thinking if you made a while loop and you put like a counter on it, it would run through draw a couple times.
You're kind of hunting around the right tree. What if we give it an age that starts to increment when the bubble lands? So let's try that. We'll go up here and we'll add a member variable called age. And we'll initialize it to 0. Okay, given that, how do you think I should use this variable? Ideas? Hint, it might happen in here. We want this guy to start aging when y equals y prev, right? So what's a condition that we could put into the move function that would have this thing start aging when y equals y prev? How about if y equals y prev age plus plus? So the age of the bubble while it's still floating stays 0. But then when it settles on the bottom, right, the move function starts incrementing the age. How does that change isStale? Right, so if age is bigger than 50, say. If age is bigger than or equal to 50, then return true, otherwise return false. So what I'm doing now is introducing a delay in the expiring process. Let's see if we've totally wrecked our program. It appears to be behaving about the same. Right? They get down there, they sit there for a while, and then they go away, which is pretty much what they were doing before. All right. How can I use this to change the color before it goes away?
So you before age plus plus you change the color?
Where's the color set for these bubbles? In render, right? So I now have this additional variable age, which goes from 0 up to 50, and I can futz around with it in the render function. So instead of the stroke color being 255, let's have them turn red right before they die. So let's start with the full-on color. And what I'd like to do is have the second two arguments go to 0 as age goes to 50. Can I do that? Okay, so for most of the life of this bubble, its age is 0. And if age is 0, what does this formula give me? In the parentheses, it gives me 1, right? And so the full-on thing is 255, 255, 255, which is white. Nothing changes. Then the thing lands and it starts aging. What happens when age gets to 50? What is the thing in the parentheses? 0. And so now you have 255, 0, 0. And what happens as age goes from 0 up to 50? Those two channels go down to 0. Let's see what that looks like. And then I will let you go. The possibilities are limitless. They really are. What I wanted to do, but it would have taken too much time, was instead of just changing the color from white to red and having it disappear, it'd be cool to put in a sequence of frames that shows a pop, right? Which you now are ready to do, right? All you have to do, instead of gradually changing the color, you just gradually draw different phases of a pop. And it doesn't have to be that many frames. Probably 2 or 3 frames would be enough to suggest a pop. So maybe as age goes from 0 to 15, it's the first part of the pop, and then from 15 to 30, the second part, and then from 30 to 45, the third part of the pop.
Can it do sound?
It can, but we need an external library, and also the sound. From my own explorations, getting sound to work in the browser is difficult. Not impossible, and I think that there's a lot of progress being made towards that end. This processing is a fairly young programming language, and it's only in the last 2 or 3 years that people have really started to throw some weight behind it. So I would expect sound to come soon. Have a nice weekend.